stop overengineering experiences. One of the traps that we have in our industry is work with trends. The experiential, the transformational, all these buzzwords. We're distancing ourselves from the essence and the spirit of travel.
Couldn't agree more with you.
The land and the Galapagos, what we've chosen to do is timeless.
Stephanie Bonham-Carter, who alongside with her husband, Michael, created Galapagos Safari Camp as a deeply personal vision for conservation, community, and a different kind of luxury experience.
It is a place of raw nature and evolution. It's the wellness of disconnection to reconnect. Our team is all about making you feel special and feeling that connection. The national park, visiting other islands.
It's just so magical.
It's impossible not to enjoy the experience, really.
As the world speeds up and we are so connected, actually humans are reverting back to basics, and they really want to be more in touch with nature, more in touch with themselves, hear their own thoughts.
It's very easy to get lost in the noise. Every time I go back to Galapagos, I ask myself,
every great travel journey begins with a question. Where to next? And how do we protect what makes it beautiful? Welcome to the Conscious Check-In, the podcast where sustainable hospitality, unforgettable travel, and bold conservation stories collide. I'm your host, Amy Wald, and this is your Conscious Check-In.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Conscious Check-In. You know, some of the most powerful hospitality stories aren't necessarily the loudest or the ones that get the most PR. They're the ones built with intention over time. And today, I'm very excited to be joined by Stephanie Bonham-Carter, who, alongside with her husband, Michael, created Galapagos Safari Camp as a deeply personal vision for conservation, community, and a different kind of luxury experience we're going to hear all about today. Hi, Stephanie. How are you?
hello, Amy. What a lovely introduction. Nice to speak to you.
Oh, thank you. Wonderful to speak with you as well. We can't wait to hear all about Galapagos Safari Camp. You know, would you tell us a little bit about how it started? You know, I know that it was not necessarily on accident, but you weren't set out to create a hotel. No. And tell us a little bit about that origin story.
Yes, of course. As you rightly mentioned, it wasn't a plan. It wasn't a business proposition. We stumbled upon this wonderful property that we fell in love with when we visited the Galapagos. We were on holiday. And we started dreaming. One thing led to another. And I suppose it was that stage in our life that allowed us to go a little bit crazy and start dreaming, and that dream became a reality. And in terms of why we did what we did, it was the connection that we had with the land and the Galapagos. There was no other alternative that we would have considered, either having a cruise or building an ordinary urban hotel. It didn't reflect the almost religious experience that we had when we first visited.
Wow, that's incredible. And I think a lot of things start dreaming, right? You have this, all of a sudden, this dream of doing something. But this wasn't a typical, place for a hotel or for a tourism destination. This was a pasture for cattle. Is that right?
Yes, that is right. So every island on the archipelago is very, very different. There's many islets. Some of them are more lush than others. This particular island, Santa Cruz, is right in the middle of the archipelago. It's a central island. And you have the lowlands and the highlands. In the highlands, there are very many different microclimates. And we happened to be in a transition zone where the cacti meet the lusher vegetation behind there. And it's a very last farm, the very last property that borders the national park. So it's agricultural land, so to speak. So it was a cattle farm, but we loved the location and the views of this property. So I suppose it wasn't of interest to anyone else at the time, but we literally fell in love with it.
Oh, interesting. So did that make it, given agriculture, did that make it more challenging to, quote unquote, convert it into a destination for travelers?
I mean, everything was challenging about it. There was nothing there. And I think that to have that vision, it did take a little bit of madness, and romanticism and inspiration.
Yes.
So I think that for your average person, that they wouldn't have seen what we saw there. And we had actually climbed a tree because other than that, you had elephant grass up to your head. There was nothing there that your average person would have been able to envision. So it was challenging in that there was nothing there, and we had to do everything from opening the road to learn how to collect rainwater. You know, there is no water on our island, especially up there. So yes, building there was also a challenge. That there was very little availability of materials on the island at the time as well. Not that we were going to be building anything heavy on cement, which is where we imported the idea of the tented camp. But yeah, it wasn't easy.
But I think that's a great lesson for hospitality. And I think we're kind of in this evolution of hospitality where to stay relevant and to be a protector and a guardian of a lot of these places, you have to have a unique vision and have to be prepared for not a straight road, right? And maybe bring in other people that can lend to that unique idea. So let's talk about the place itself. When you think about Galapagos, I know I haven't been there, but what I've been exposed to up until now is more of ocean-based and water-based experiences to the Galapagos. So, on the coast you're staying or you're coming by cruise. Tell us about what is so different about your experience and what made you think that this would be a place that travelers would want to visit to. That's a trick question, by the way.
Well, no, I think it's a very relevant question. You can't go to the Galapagos and not see the different islands, because that's where you get the essence of what Galapagos is about. So our proposition was not to not visit other islands, quite the contrary, but to visit them differently. So rather than cruising, which was at the time the predominant way of visiting the Galapagos, where you go around it and you're seeing the islands from outside in, we changed that to seeing them from inside out. So we are immersing ourselves in our island and in the highlands of our island. But we do go to visit other islands, but for the day. So you will go to visit the central island, and then you would come back to terra firma, so to speak. I think the reason why our proposition was so different, especially at the time, if you think about it, this was 2007 when we opened our doors or the zippers to our tents. We were the first tented camp in Latin America, and there were very few operations on that were land-based in the Galapagos. So it was quite pioneering at the time. And I think what made it different is that we didn't go there with the intention of building that business. We moved there because we wanted to live there have our family there. I thought homeschooling was going to be much easier than it actually wasn't, which, you can never be prepared for parenting, especially in such a remote place. But we went there to find and to share our passion for that pristine environment that we adopted. So I suppose that changed everything, and our relationship to the land and the sea, and how we went about sharing this with visitors. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I can see how the evolution of it just became, just a new discovery for you and travelers, probably as it was unfolding, because you didn't set out to create a hospitality business. So for the listeners, just to understand, you've mentioned tented camps a couple of times, but so you are inland, up a little bit on elevation, so you don't sit right along the sea. And these are tents. These are not traditional, walled hotel rooms. Tell us a little bit about that. How big are they? How many? What does that look like from a guest perspective?
Yes. Well, I would say think of Out of Africa, and that was our inspiration. We love nature and the connection with nature that you don't get when you're in an urban bubble. And at the same time, we do love and appreciate the creature comforts and the poetry in life. So the tented camp allowed us to create an experience that was more immersive. When you're under canvas, you are protected, but you're at the same time exposed to the elements. So you will hear the flapping of the tent, of the wind at night. You will wake up to the sound of birds. You'll hear the screeching owl at night. And so it allows for a romantic and immersive experience. We created something small by design. We didn't want to have masses. It was always supposed to be very, very exclusive and small. Something that we could manage ourselves, something that would not break the magic of the place. And so, of course, we're not talking about the little tents where you go camping. We are talking about 30 square meters with, your wooden floors. It's not opulent, but it's extremely comfortable and discreet. It was, I suppose, my husband and I appreciate, I love the way that you opened this podcast, the quiet voices in life. It's very easy to get lost in the noise. And I think that if you go back to balance and quiet, the connection with your environment is that much deeper. So I don't know if this answered your question.
It absolutely did. And I think you've touched on it perfectly. These are the things, as everyone is talking about in hospitality right now, as the world speeds up and we are so connected, actually humans are reverting back to basics, and they really want to be more in touch with nature, more in touch with themselves, hear their own thoughts, right? There's so much noise out there, and this just speaks to that so much. And you thought of it long before it was a trend, so to speak. So you have something that you call appropriate luxury, and I feel like this is what you're discussing. Tell us what you mean by that. It's, I'm sure, building on what you just said, but in a place like Galapagos, what does that mean? What does it not mean also?
I like that you asked this question because it is it's a phrase that I believe, or the way I heard it was via Edward Norton, who spoke about it in one of the tented camps that he supports in Kenya. And when I heard this, I thought, this is exactly what conveys what we want to do. So appropriate is not about restriction, it's about respect. It means working with a place, not imposing on it. So it asks you to be thoughtful about what belongs and what doesn't belong in a place. So, for example, in the Galapagos, fresh water is limited. So a rainwater-fed pool becomes a luxury. Airflow replaces air conditioning, and simplicity becomes part of that experience. So what it is not, it is imposing an urban model, an urban bubble into a natural environment. So to us, the true luxury is being invited into a place like this in comfort, but without disrupting its essence.
I love that. And do you think that travelers understand that prior to arrival, or is that something that they're exposed to and start to learn as they spend more time at the safari camp?
It's a good question. I think it depends on the preparation.
Mm-hmm.
We are very much about managing expectations and not educating, but educating in a kind way, in the sense of we don't like to oversell. I would rather have a client who goes somewhere else if they feel that this is not going to fit their likes and wants and needs. So when a traveler has that curiosity and open heart and mind to know where they're going to, they come a little bit better prepared. And those that don't still have an amazing experience because they're not sacrificing comfort. They're not sacrificing service, because we really are very much about service and wonderful food and taking care of our visitors. So I think the magic happens whether you're prepared or not, unless you go with a very rigid mindset. But it's impossible not to enjoy the experience, really, because you are so immersed in this beautiful environment and exposed to these fabulous experiences with a level of connection with wildlife and nature that it's very difficult to find elsewhere. And on the other hand, while you're at camp, you're very well taken care of. So our team is all about making you feel special and feeling that connection. So, yeah.
Amazing. And I love that you say manage expectations, because that does remind me a lot of safaris, the traditional kind in Africa. You know, I've grown up thinking that you are guaranteed to see animals. And I think it's the same with tourism as a philosophy. I think in the industry, we have a responsibility to take the travelers along and help them manage their expectations, one, and help them understand what we have to do in order to create more conservation-based places and preserve them. So, you know, in Ecuador, I'm going to be a little bit contrarian. It's one of the most fragile and protected places in the world. You know, how do you reconcile bringing people there, but at the same time helping them travel in a responsible way, and then watching some of, you know, maybe other organizations still getting it wrong?
Yeah, it's a charged question. It's a good question. I would say that getting it wrong, we live in a polarized world.
Yeah.
We live, you know, the right and wrong, good and bad, a world when we can hardly have a conversation and agree on anything because it's either black or white. So I'm not one to say that we're getting it right and someone else is getting it wrong. I can say, however, that what I do witness in the industry is this crazy effort to stage and overprotect travelers. And then we're distancing ourselves from the essence and the spirit of travel. When we are so profit-driven, it is very easy to fall into that trap. And I think that it is important to have a conversation about what travel should be about and how we would like to see the industry evolved, whether it is in Ecuador or anywhere in the world. I think the problems that we face are global. They're no longer regional. Every problem, every challenge, I should say, is not limited to a single place, you know. If you overfish in one part of the world, the effects are not going to be just felt in that area. But you know, we're so interconnected. So I think that the important conversation that we ought to have is, how do we assume that responsibility? How can we be agents for a change that is more sustainable in every industry? And in our specific one, I think that where do we find that balance between profitability and responsibility? You see, in our specific camp, in our specific business came hand in hand with a life choice. So of course we need to be profitable because we need to keep things going. But that was never the core fundamental value of what we were doing. So when I look around and I see other business-driven propositions, then of course it's a different ballgame. Again, I'm not sure if I've answered your question.
Yes. So let's talk about in action, practical ways you blend those two things together. Giving a traveler and a tourist a literal once in a lifetime experience. I mean, yes, you can go to Ecuador more than once and the Galapagos, but typically, right, it's this big bucket list, and helping them do it responsibly. What does conservation and protection and responsible travel look like at Galapagos Safari Camps?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I'd love to give it some context because we
Sure.
work in the framework of the Galapagos National Park.
Yes.
Which I think is a huge scaffolding that shouldn't be underestimated, because I think that part of the reason why the Galapagos is still such an exceptional environment is because we are highly regulated. So I think that actually works in everyone's favor, because we can't, even if we wanted to, we can't go crazy developing, which is a huge plus. So within that framework, we are highly regulated and we have to be aware of our environment. Now, what we do within that environment, I think that is reflected in every one of our choices. The fact that we chose something that has a lighter imprint on the environment, such as a tented camp, rather than heavily cemented urban bubble. That is an essential choice that we made. The fact that we try to be lighter on our energy consumption without air conditioning, because we don't actually need it. We have an amazing amount of airflow because we're higher, and the way that we've positioned our tents. A lot of people think, and a lot of, especially American travelers, will ask about air conditioning, but our levels of heat and humidity are not comparable to a Miami, for example. So it's actually not required, and we can work with the environment to make our tents and the experience extremely comfortable. Rainwater collection. Again, as I was explaining, there is no water in the Galapagos, so learning to gather rainwater during the rainy season and store it, that's a challenge that we've managed to learn about and overcome. So those are examples of very, you'd say, basic things that can be done and that we're doing. And believe it or not, a lot of people don't. So it's just sort of common sense to us. Also choosing to be small and not working with a massified tourism model. And that in itself determines the experience that we can offer our guests, because it is going to be a sort of small, intimate, more personalized experience by default. And then the exposure to the national park by visiting other islands. So I think that everything about what we do is a reflection of our commitment to the environment that we work with.
So what I hear you saying is policy and, having government, structure involved to protect a place is so necessary to really protect a place, and working with nature. I think, like you said, using common sense in places where we're already supplied with those things that we've modernized. But if we can kind of take a step back and see how we can reduce that modernization and work with nature is really the key. Now, we can't do it everywhere and in all aspects, but I think that there are situations, even in, urban areas, that can happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, I think that one of the traps that we have in our industry is work with trends. It's quite funny because in the 20 years that we've been doing this, I've heard everything, the experiential, the transformational, the this and the that, and all these buzzwords. I think, okay, we've ticked every box without setting out to do that. It's just simply because that is what we actually do. Because my husband and I came from a place of, we've been privileged enough to see a lot of the world. We weren't shaped by the industry itself. We're not hoteliers by profession. Well, now we are, but we weren't trained that way. And so we were able to really have a compass and cut out the noise. And what we've chosen to do is timeless. So we go beyond buzzwords, so to speak. And it's beautiful to see that, having seen the sort of extreme luxury and the massified tourism, people are really finally understanding what we set out to do 20 years ago. And there is a renewed appreciation for that level of authenticity and immersion. So we really hope that we will see more of this, that we will see smaller projects rather than the sort of massified urban propositions.
I agree. And we all know, kind of as we were talking about in the beginning of the conversation, luxury is really being redefined in this moment. And a lot of it is about space and taking time. And that sounds like exactly what people get to experience when they come to Galapagos Safari Camp. So you mentioned all these definitions, and I couldn't agree more with you. Not only are trends sometimes not the right way to go, but I think it confuses the traveler too. What am I supposed to be doing? And what does this mean? I love that you use nature-based a lot. Mm-hmm. I tend to like that, not only because I think people can understand that, but it's true to the essence of what we hope that travel continues to be, which is protecting nature. So how do you define it when it's really done right? What would you say nature-based hospitality is?
Well, first of all, I think that it can't be mass-produced, mm-hmm. because that would go against it. Mm-hmm. However, it does require a balance, because it requires genuine hospitality with a level of comfort and a level of care, but mindfulness for restraint. So I think that finding that balance is tricky. Marrying good service and good hospitality with immersion and respect for the environment. It needs to be deeply rooted in the environment, so that we don't shape the place and we work with the place where we're operating, so that the experience feels both effortless and authentic. Because you see, if we go with that flow, we're not creating a huge footprint in the environment. It's the moment that we go massified and urbanized and too profit driven that I think, as we discussed earlier, we can lose the plot a little bit. It doesn't require an enormous, it doesn't require a genius. It just requires love, passion, common sense, and commitment.
And intention, right? I've kind of held on to that word my whole career now in this space. And it's, if you just set out with intention and think about what your surroundings need from you, do a little research, then I think you're on the right path. So let's talk about the traveler. You have so many options when you come to the Galapagos Safari Camp. What does it look like if two travelers are coming with completely two different expectations? One is adventure driven. They want to just go and do everything they possibly can. One's a little slower and reflective. Take us through maybe two different journeys of a different traveler.
It always starts with understanding intent of our guests. So for someone more adventure driven, we would create a more dynamic itinerary. For example, diving, time at sea with a fisherman, for example. I would encourage privatizing the experience so that they can go at their own tempo and do as much as they want. So that would allow them freedom of place. For someone on the more reflective side of the spectrum, I would encourage to slow everything down. Fewer moments of deeper immersion, perhaps time with a scientist where they can actually get to understand a project, or with an artist where they can, potter around and observe their landscape. So activities that would allow them to both understand where they are and give them the time to reflect. So that's the beauty of being able to not throw everyone in the same boat and everyone doing the same activity, but design their itinerary to meet their expectations. We often have multi-generational families, and I love that because you have grandparents, parents, and children, and they all have different needs and different tempos. And those are the most challenging itineraries to build. But you can do it beautifully. And it's lovely to see the grandparents being there and observing their families without having to hold them back in a way,
Yes.
So it's, there is a beauty in facilitating that.
And, I think a lot of urban hoteliers, if they would be, introduced to Galapagos Safari Camp, they would think that there aren't any kind of similarities in operations. But you brought up so many things that mirror traditional hospitality, hyper-personalization, and helping people really tailor their trips based on the type of traveler they are, what they want to get out of the experience, and then who they're traveling with. So I think it can, I think there can be a lot learned from something such as your organization. I think that's so wonderful. So let's talk about wellness a little bit. I mean, we've talked about it, but without saying the word wellness. And that's what I really love about a place like yours is, to me, this is the true sense of wellness. Yes, we all love a massage and we all love to pamper ourselves. But I think the most takeaway we can have are these types of wellness-driven experiences. How does this look different? How would you define the wellness takeaways that a traveler could get from Galapagos Safari Camp without a traditional spa?
Yeah, a great question. I think it would be the wellness of the soul, the wellness of connection, because you're totally right. We are not a location where you're going to find beautiful spas and massages and treatments. In fact, if that's what you're going to look for, you're going to be disappointed. I don't know, go to Thailand to get a beautiful spa and massage, or Bali, if that is the intention. I think especially in our day and age, it's the wellness of disconnection to reconnect. It is a place of raw nature and evolution. I think it is the wellness of understanding how we fit into the larger picture. You know, every time I go back to Galapagos, I ask myself, why am I so in love and enchanted with the Galapagos? How about our children? I mean, we chose to go to Galapagos. Our children didn't. They were just born there, and yet it is their happy place. And we've traveled as a family and as a couple extensively. Amazing places on Earth. But there is something deep and meaningful and connecting about the Galapagos, which is wildlife and nature. You know, you don't have natural predators in the Galapagos. So wherever you go, you're going to have these encounters, which are very special because you have no one running away from you. Whether you see the blue-footed boobies mating, or whether you are diving and you encounter whale sharks or reef sharks or hammerhead sharks, everyone is minding their own business, you know? And so you feel that you are in your rightful place, just one more creature amongst the many. It's a humbling experience. You stop being the protagonist. You're just one more element in this amazing life and universe and planet where we live in. So it's redefining. And so, yes, I think it's the wellness of mind, soul, spirit, and reconnection.
I love that so much. It gives me chills. I just, and people probably get sick to hear me say this, but I love animals so much. And I really, believe that animals can solve a lot of the problems that we have in the world, because when we reconnect with them and we appreciate them, they connect us with a part of ourselves that we're not always connected with on an everyday basis. And we forget to, have that curiosity and spirituality and all of the things that they possess when we're going through our busy, busy lives. So, I love thinking about those encounters that people dream about. We read about those things in books when we're children, and the blue-footed booby, when you look on your website, it's just so magical. Okay, so let's start to wrap up a little bit, and tell me, in a place as fragile as Galapagos, what gives you hope and optimism, in a world that's kind of crazy, that, in terms of travel and tourism, we hear about a lot of, disheartening things happening, but how do you find hope in these moments?
Well, in the Galapagos specifically, it gives me hope. And I really pray this will continue to be the case, that there won't be that level of over-tourism that we've seen in other places, because it is a national park. I mean, yes. 97% of the archipelago is a national park. It is a place where making anything happen is extremely difficult. So yes, you have to have a passion in order to do that. So I hope that limiting factor will prevail. That would be one part of my answer. And then the other one, Galapagos gives me hope at every level, because I see the resilience of nature. Whether it's an El Niño year and species are affected because of a lack of food, for example, but they adapt. And it's not for nothing that the Galapagos is the cradle of evolution, and where Darwin came to understand this. You see it. You know, there are studies, for example, the grand couple who have been studying how finches, the beak of the finch has evolved in real time. And you see how they adapt to whether there is more or less food because it's been a more rainy year or less rainy year. And the fact that we are so adaptable as species, and when I say we, I'm not talking about humans, I'm talking about all of the living creatures, our ability to change and adapt. I think that's what gives me hope. And let's hope we learn our lessons.
That's a great answer. And, it really goes back to kind of that saying that, animal or nature doesn't need us, we need nature, and nature will always prevail. It will evolve. Whether we are going to evolve with it and adapt with it is kind of another question. Okay, so this is a great segue into the next question, which is something I ask everyone. If Galapagos Safari Camp had an animal energy, what would that animal energy be?
Interesting. Well, when we are located in a place where we see giant tortoises roam, and there is something so grounded and resilient about them, completely indifferent to trends, and they allow for a mindset shift. They're there to stay. They own the place. I think that would be the sort of grounding energy that I see the camp associated with.
I love it. They're just such incredible creatures. I'm sure to witness them in person is just out of this world. Okay, Stephanie, so I'm going to end with one question. Of course, we want travelers to be inspired by this conversation, and we want them to book their safari, reach out to you. But I also think it's important for hoteliers that could be listening to this that maybe are not anywhere near someplace like Ecuador and the Galapagos. And they are thinking, yeah, well, this is great for the Galapagos, but I'm in an urban area or I'm in a place where this doesn't allow me to do this. What is one mindset shift or, maybe one takeaway that you think a hotelier, regardless of where they are in the world, could start to think about things a little bit more intentionally, or how do they start to craft their own unique offering to A, protect nature, and B, stay relevant in this really crazy hospitality space right now?
I think it depends on the actual hotel, but I would say to stop over-engineering experiences. I think that there is a tendency to oversell and overstage and protect guests from reality. And I think in doing that, we strip away from the essence of travel. I think that if we learn to be honest about the place, its limitations, its rhythm, its character, guests can choose how they want to engage to their environment. But of course, I'm thinking more. I'm thinking less of urban hotels. I'm thinking more of because. Yeah, but that would be my answer.
No, I think that's a great answer. And I think that's a great answer for anywhere in the world. That is a mindset shift. And I think that our tendency as human beings is to over-engineer things. We're always trying to prove something or be better or get better. And so I think that is such incredible advice, Stephanie. Thank you. So Stephanie, how can travelers, anyone get in touch with you? What would you say the first step is If someone says, this is exactly the kind of experience myself, my family is looking for, what's the first step that they take?
Well, I mean, we have our website, so they're very welcome to visit our web and get acquainted with the property. They can book through us directly, or they can choose their preferred travel advisors. Each person has a different way of travel, so I think that it's important for them to definitely see our website so that they can see what we can offer and take it from there.
And you have a beautiful website that is very helpful, provides a story, provides all those really interesting details. So yes, I think that's the first thing everyone should do. So we will make sure we link that in the show notes. Stephanie, I want to thank you personally for all the work that you're doing to preserve somewhere incredibly special and rare. And I hope I get to witness it firsthand one day.
Thank you, Amy. We would love to have you stay with us.
Thank you, everyone. And if you would, please like and subscribe and leave us a comment. Let us know what you loved about this conversation and who you would like to hear from next. And we will see you on the Conscious Check-In next time.
That was your Conscious Check-In. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and let us know who you'd love to hear from next. Until next time, travel deeper and stay inspired.